Have you ever been so moved by a film or a book that it really stayed with you and you felt a slight shift in your life and your thinking? Do you know what I mean? In a recent study during the pandemic, artists were seen as the least useful role. And it's true that most of us won't be saving lives like doctors or delivering essential goods like toilet paper. But I would argue that we're kind of missing the point. I've heard a lot about how art is really important as entertainment and escapism, but I think that art really plays another vital role in our lives. They say we all have our 5 minutes of fame, and in 2019 I felt like I had my 5 minutes. My art was featured in The Guardian and I was interviewed several times by the BBC. I'd created 3 portraits in wool of Putin, Trump and Kim Jong-un and put them in special frames with clothes moth larvae. And the idea was that the larvae would gradually eat the portraits over time. And it was a very exciting week. It was only when I started reading the comments in The Guardian that I was really brought down to earth with a bump. Comments like, "Brilliant, fantastic and edgy," that was a good one. But I also had, "What a feeble and puerile political protest. This isn't even worthy of being called art." And that really got me thinking, why do I create art and what am I hoping to achieve? So just to backtrack, I've spent most of my life being creative and generally helping other people to be creative. I used to teach film and animation at the British Museum and do a bit of life drawing myself. But I didn't really explore my own creative expression. So about 5 years ago, I discovered felting and I started making pet portraits in wool and fur. I often had people send me dead dog and cat fur that I incorporated into the portrait so that it would be even more meaningful as a memento. But somehow it didn't feel authentic for me and my creativity. I'm not the biggest dog and cat fan. I'm much more into insects and reptiles. I began to explore a little bit of what interests me, and that is politics, sexuality, gender, and I started to make pieces that felt far more authentic. And what I noticed is that instead of getting likes on social media, I got comments and discussions began, and that felt far more powerful to me. I've started to think about the artists who I admire, and they're not the ones who just create pieces of work that might be seen in a gallery by a lost tourist or a culture vulture. They're the artists who live their art and bring it out onto the streets. And they're definitely the artists that think outside the box, but they don't just do that. They show us that there even is a box. For example, Grayson Perry with his persona Claire. He starts a discussion about gender and politics and society. Similarly, Vaci creates controversial pieces out on the street, and people are always discussing his work. And finally, someone who I greatly admire for his bravery is Tracini, who you might have seen on Twitter. So he's creating short films about mental health and being bipolar. And you might not immediately think of him as an artist, but they're very, very creative short films. And they certainly start an important discussion. The power of art, and I mean this broadly to mean theatre, film, music, as well as fine art, is not just in the creation of artworks, but in the meaning behind the creation, the creative thinking, showing us a new perspective and leading us to say, "I never thought of it that way." For me, the most meaningful art is an active, not a passive experience. Art created by social commentators, agitators, and activists. Art that really makes us feel inspired and, more importantly, makes us think differently.